in the chat there, and we'll deal with the questions here at the end as we move forward in this. I'm going to start out with just the origin of how in the world this started, because we've been doing missions work for a couple years, really intensely. We've been involved in missions a lot. My wife and I, we've lived in Russia and we've done different things in missions, but the last 2 years has been pretty more intensified, and we've been mainly working in Tanzania. But I always I was just feeling that this isn't the full, calling, the full purpose. And I'm like, Lord, you're tempting me in a sense, you're teasing me with missions. But what is it really that you want me to do? And so I've been praying for about 2 years. God, what is this? Because I knew that what we were doing just wasn't the full of what God really wanted us to do. And I did this Bible study on Jesus leaving the 99 and going after the one. Now, I had done that study many times. If you've been in church very long, you've heard that story many times. And the one that Jesus went or was showing in this parable was going after, I always viewed that as it's my lost neighbor or my lost coworker, or just the lost one that I need to go after and find. But this time, man, Jesus just kind of changed a little bit, wrecked me a little bit in a sense, and said, no, this is a rescue. The shepherd is actually leaving the 99 and he's going after the one that cannot come back on its own. And if that shepherd doesn't do something, that sheep is going to die. It will not make it. It's a rescue. And man, I just like, wow, Lord, that just brings a whole different angle on this. And then I felt in my spirit as I was doing this study that the Lord said, and this is what I want you to do. I want you to do rescues. I want you to rescue people. Well, I had done a lot of missions work, but I knew that rescues was a whole different way of doing missions work. And I had not done rescues before. I had done the broad missions where you evangelize, you plant churches, and you do some humanitarian type things and stuff. But I knew God was saying something different about this, that I want you to rescue people. And so I knew this was going to take me into some dark spaces, human trafficking and child slavery and these kind of things. And so I just let it settle in my spirit. And a week later, it came back up, and I said, Lord, okay, if you really want me to rescue people, you're going to have to send me somebody to rescue, because I don't know where to find them. I mean, I'm thinking, these rescues are behind, these children, they're behind criminal walls, criminal institutions, and I don't know where to find these human trafficked and sex trafficked. I don't know where to find these people. So I said, Lord, if it's really you, then send me somebody to rescue. Well, it was about 7 days later, I get an email that says, in the subject heading, it says, save our lives, we want to live. Well, is this a coincidence? And I've been getting emails from international places for about 4 years now, but not one time ever was it about a rescue. And so I am like piqued at this, and I'm thinking, whoa, literally I prayed, Lord, if it's you, send me somebody to rescue. And as I began to read this email, it was two girls, a 22 and a 21-year-old girl, that were being beaten and tortured. They had fled Afghanistan from the Taliban, and they were in Pakistan, and their lives were on the line. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know anybody in Pakistan. If you sent me somebody to rescue, I've got to validate this. I got to figure out, is this really true? Is this really, or is this a scam? I said, but I don't know anybody in Pakistan. I don't know anybody in Afghanistan. And literally 24 hours later, I'm on a pastor Zoom call, and I tell this story, and I say, but I don't know anybody in Pakistan. And a pastor raises his hand and says, I do, and they do rescues. And I'm like, okay, it's starting to, I'm a little thick-headed, but this is starting to get really clear. And then it turns out this is a refugee resettlement situation that's going to take immigration lawyers and United Nations collaboration. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know anything about this resettlement stuff. And the Lord spoke to my heart and says, what do you have? And that comes straight from the widow's oil. When Elijah asked the widow, what do you have? And she says, well, all I got's a little bit of oil here. And so I'm thinking, and I remember sitting in my living room on my couch, and I'm like, what do I have? And I look out my window, and I remember across the street from me, I have neighbors, and this is going to sound really bad, but I look out at my neighbors, and they're Middle Eastern looking. And I'm thinking, well, maybe they're Afghans, maybe they're Pakistani, I don't know. But what do I have? I have a neighbor that looks like they're Middle Eastern. And so I went and knocked on their door, and he talks to me through the doorbell, and he says, give me your phone number. I said, I'm a neighbor right over here. He says, give me your phone number and I'll call you back. So calls me back, and he says, so what do you need? I said, this is going to be the strangest question ever. And I said, I want to apologize up front. I said, but can you tell me what nationality you are? And, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible, And so there's a pause on the other side. And then he says, well, I'm Egyptian. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I said, here's a crazy thing. I said, I am rescuing a family from the Taliban. That sounds so crazy. And I didn't know if you were, Afghan or Pakistan and knew something about the process. And he says, no, I'm an Egyptian pharmacist. I'm like, I can't be further from, I'm really off here. He says, but how many of you love those godly buts, when somebody says that? He says, but my wife is right here, and she actually works for the United States government and works with the people that do refugee resettlement. I was like, oh my gosh. So I knew at that moment that this is what God was leading me to do, was to rescue people. And it was undeniable from these facts. And so I just knew this is the way I got to go. But it was bigger than me. And so I thought, God, I'm going to have to start a nonprofit to be able to bring awareness to what is going on. And as we got into this, that contact that pastored, I know somebody there and they do rescues. As I began to talk with that pastor in Pakistan, and he's involved in child slavery there in Pakistan with children working in the brick kilns in forced labor. And my heart just began to go out to this whole situation. And I'm like, this is where we're heading. This is what we want to do. So we're focusing on child slavery in Pakistan, which there's about 3 million in modern day slavery right now in Pakistan. We're focusing on persecuted refugee children, which is the Afghan family that we're actually trying to rescue right now. And we're in the middle of that, deep in the middle of that. Just so happens that we vetted that situation. It was valid, but they were being hunted down. So what we had to do with that situation was literally move them to a new place, purchase them or rent a new apartment, move them under the cover of darkness into this new apartment, and we're providing rent and shelter, food and utilities on a monthly basis while keeping them hidden while we're working out the immigration and the United Nations status for them. We're also focusing on child trafficking in Thailand and Malaysia. This is child sex trafficking, and they are dealing with kids are involved in this. We're dealing with child abandonment in Eswatini and Swaziland, which is a small little country of 1 million people in between South Africa and Mozambique. And actually on Monday, I'm heading there for about 3 weeks to be in Swaziland. And we're also concentrating on medical emergencies in Tanzania. Now, there's a few stats here. I'll just go through them really quickly, but I'll bring them up on the screen. And Missy can highlight if it's too small to read. But Human trafficking makes more money than Starbucks, Google, Nike, and NFL combined. This is a $150 billion industry. The profiting from this is forced labor is $43 billion. Domestic servitude is $8 billion. And then sexual exploitation is almost $100 billion. This is a real problem. Obviously, you can see that. And then here's the locations where those problems are existing, and mainly 72 million in Africa and 62 million in Asia. And we are focusing on those areas that in Africa and in South Asia. And the way that we're doing this is through a threefold process. Is prevention, which in this phase, we use education, skills training, awareness to prevent children and families falling into slavery. We do rescue, and that's actually rescuing people out. And I'll show you how and explain how we do those rescues here in a minute. But those are in those situations in sex trafficking or human trafficking or slavery in the brick kilns. We have to rescue those children out of those situations. And then we have recovery for those that actually come out of those because of the trauma that they have faced while being in slavery. Because it's not just slavery, but it's beatings. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, they can be beaten. They can be, it's just anything you can think of can happen because these children are owned by their slave owners in a sense. We think, oh, there's no slavery today. Yes, there is. There's modern slavery that's taking place, and obviously more in Africa and Asia than anywhere else. And so we offer prevention, rescue, and recovery. Now, there was an India man named Kailash Satyarthi, and he has saved and rescued 132 children from slavery in India. He says you got to have four things to rescue. You got to be careful, you got to be fearless, you got to be clever, and you got to be swift. And we follow those four things when we do our rescues. And how we do those rescues is the child slavery in Pakistan. Basically what happens, and this is mainly Christians because they are oppressed there in that country, they don't get good jobs, so they stay in poverty. Well, when they're in poverty, they don't have collateral. And when an emergency situation comes in, whether it could be medical or just whatever the situation is, they have to borrow money. But they can't borrow money from a bank or a reputable financial institution because they have no collateral. So they have to borrow money from what we would call here maybe like a bookie or the mafia or something underhanded, because that's the only way they can get money. The creditors give them this money, tell them they can pay it off in a year, so they're okay with that, and they suck them in. But the problem is if they borrow $500, a year comes around, they go back and say, okay, how much do I owe you? And that creditor may say 490, even after a year. It's very corrupt. They don't keep any records. And the threat is if you don't pay this debt, we're going to take your kids. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I've realized that this was still going on. I mean, the story with the widow and the oil, that's what she said. The creditors are coming to take my child. And I thought this was just way back in the day, but no, this is still happening today. And if those families are not able to pay that debt, then those creditors come and take their kids. The girls, they can put in prostitution. The boys, they can put in forced labor, making bricks in the brick kilns. If they're not a brick owner, they can bring them into their homes for domestic servitude. There's sexual abuse, all kinds of things. They don't allow the children to say and speak about what there's happening to them because they threaten to kill them. And so it's a very, very oppressive situation. And these families, when they're working in the brick kilns, they get $1.50 in their pay, and $1.50 goes to their debt. And then a year later, the interest it means that they never pay off their debt. And these children have been in slavery for decades and have become adults, and they're still in slavery, and that debt is passed down to their children and their children. And so there's some families that have literally been generation and generation working forced labor in the brick kilns. And you can find all this information on YouTube just by searching Pakistan child slavery. There are plenty of news worthy actual videos about all of this, and it's just a very corrupt situation. And so we find the children that are working in the brick kilns or in these slavery situations, and we pay the debt for the family, for them, so that they can get their kids back. That's how we rescue those in the brick kilns and in the child slavery in Pakistan. And then we help them recover by providing job or business opportunities. We purchase the motorcycles with the carriers on the back, the rickshaws, and the father can then drive around the town, pick up people and carry them, and he can make money and he can stay out of debt, so that once we've rescued this family and rescued these kids, they never have to go back into debt again. So that's Pakistan. We also obviously are working with the persecuted refugee children that are in Pakistan as well, providing safe housing away from the threat, basic necessities like food and clothing, and we're developing a legal pathway for them to leave the country, which requires immigration, United Nations lawyers, and working with the receiving countries and the sponsors. In Swaziland, or Eswatini as it's now called, we deal with child abandonment. There's so much poverty that's taken place there, and HIV and AIDS has killed a lot of the parents off. So what we find there are children that have been abandoned on the side of the street, even babies that are on the side of the street that have no one to take care of, no one to bring them. And so what we do there is we find the children that are abandoned on the streets or are brought to us from the social workers, and we bring them into our ministry home there, which is like an orphanage, but it's a family. The lady who runs that ministry, her name's Elizabeth, and she adopts every single child and gives that child her last name. And they have a school there. We work with them, have a school there from K4 all the way up to 12th grade. So they have food, they have medicine, they have home, they have love, they have a school, they learn, they grow. And so we find those abandoned children, we bring them to this home. The child is then adopted and given into a family there, and then we support the child on a monthly basis for complete care, including the school and medical, because we can't just grab children that are off the streets that are abandoned and then bring them and drop them off at the orphanage there, our ministry there, that and then don't support them financially. So we help with all of that care, complete care, for the abandoned children that are on the side of the streets there in Swaziland. In Thailand and Malaysia, it is way more complicated because we're dealing with sex trafficking with children. This is crazy stuff. And 70% of the men that visit Thailand are there for the sex tourism. That's a staggering statistic when you think about that. But 70% of men that visit Thailand are there for sex tourism. So what we do there is the plan is to seek out children or young adults being offered on the streets and in various venues. If you've ever heard of the Walking Street, it's just south of Bangkok, and that is the biggest red light district. That's where the children are being trafficked. And so we seek those out that are being offered in these venues or on the streets. We have to determine if they are being pimped out by their parents. Yes, their parents will do this because of poverty, whether they're being pimped out by the traffickers, or if they're of age by choice because of poverty as well. And if it's the parents or by choice, we offer a way out with support, education, and opportunities. If it's the traffickers, believe it or not, we might be able to actually purchase the child from the traffickers. Now, you would say, and I get this a lot, well, doesn't that just feed into their hands and into the system and they just go and get more kids? Well, yes, it's possible that happens, but again, our threefold approach is prevention first. So if we can prevent these children from actually flowing into the system, then we have prevented the flow, and then we're rescuing them out of that. Then that lowers the rate of this of the child trafficking and human trafficking. And there's 3 ways that we can identify those people, those children, to offer prevention. It's the 3 P's. Number 1 is parentless. If a child is parentless, poor, or pretty, they're a target. So you can remember the 3 P's. And so the traffickers are trying to find these children that fall under these 3 categories. They're parentless, they're poor, and they're pretty. And they offer them jobs, which then they get sucked into trafficking. They offer them these wonderful things and say, oh, I'm going to make your life better. And then they get trafficked and then they can't get out of it. So we also can identify those 3 P's and provide prevention, programs, education to identify and bring awareness so that that stops that flow coming in. And then, of course, if they're in it, we got to rescue them out of it. And then once they come out, there's so much trauma involved in that we have recovery houses or programs that can counsel them and bring them the healing that they actually need. And then in Tanzania, it's medical emergencies. We find those that have life and death medical situations, provide funds for those medicines and surgeries to save their life, and even provide round trip transportation to hospitals if it's a long distance. And there's a scripture that God gave me at the very beginning of this, and it's Psalms 82, 3-4 that says, defend the poor and the fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and the needy, deliver the poor and needy, and rescue them from the hand of the wicked. God is telling us to rescue people from the hand of the wicked. And so this is what we do. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll definitely try to answer those. You can contact us anyway with questions as well. We're transparent about this. We want people to travel with us to these countries. If you want to see on the ground, see firsthand what's happening, then you can come with us on these trips. But if you are interested, because this is an interest meeting, and if you're interested to stay up to date on what we're doing on the rescues, please provide us with an email. You can put that in the chat if you want to, or on the homepage of our website, we have a subscribe button at theonerescues.org. And if we get your email there, we will provide you updates on the rescues. And we also have 6 teams that we are building right now. I'll just put this up here on the screen as well. And basically, we have a prayer team that prays for our rescues, and we want people to join that prayer team. You will get email updates of our prayer requests and the things that we need. An awareness team, which just tells everybody that you know, using your own social media accounts, about the One Rescues and what we're doing. Liking our Facebook page and our Instagram to help bring awareness to that. We need a marketing team that is skilled in social media managing, so that we can have that person manage our own accounts. Email campaigns, website development, photography, video, these kind of things. We need a fundraising team. Obviously, this takes money to do that. But then we have donor support teams as well that supports the donors, provides them with reports and videos and those things to foster that relationship and connection. And then we have an operation team. And this is kind of logistics. So that provides communication in country. And also it says, I want to go in the country and I want to help build those prevention programs, and I want to help build the recovery programs, and maybe even be part of a rescue as well. And so these are the teams that we are building. If you're interested in any of those or want more information about that, also put your email in the chat there and tell us what team you're interested to know more about. We won't commit you to anything, obviously, but if you're interested in knowing more about those,